May I have your attention, please? At this time, please turn off your cell phones. Disruptions will not be tolerated. Everyone will be allowed to speak during the citizens' comments. Thank you.
This meeting is called to order. Today is March the 24th, 2016, and it is 7:04. Please stand for the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven,
Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen.
to establish, please recite the U.S. Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the Texas Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. We have to establish a quorum, Councilwoman Tejada, Councilman Ortiz, Councilman Miller, we have a quorum. And now for citizen comments. Please step up. State your name.
Tomas Robles, Floresville. I'm kind of disappointed with the city. The American flag is still full staff, and we need to take charge and put it half staff. It was ordered by the President of the United States that the American flag goes half staff. Also, Sunday, I was at McDonald's on 10th Street. I don't know if you heard this or not, but I had my grandkids and we were eating and stuff, and this guy came and parked. He was going to the bathroom between the car and my truck. I called the police, and guess who he was? He was a wanted guy, pedophile. And I don't know, it just happened because what he was doing. And I just want to let you know that, they're running around just like terrorists. They're running around, and you need to be careful, especially when there are kids around. And yeah, they caught him, and they were happy because he was like 4 or 5 months wanted.
Thank you.
My other question, that we have power of the streets, but why are we allowing big trucks to park in front of the houses and stuff? They might be empty, but we don't know that. In the summertime, it's going to cause a lot of damage to the roads and the housing areas. And I'm just letting you know, maybe we need to put the police of Floresville to go out there and give some type of warnings or something, because you know what? It's going to tear up the streets. And I also want to know, is it authorized for police officers to go in uniform in the car, they're going to pick up kids from school? So I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it happen. And these are government city cars. And the last one, the phone ordinance is not working. I've been going over to the school and everybody's driving in the car on the phones. We need to put police out there or something to police up all these people. I mean, we're going to spend money, we're going to go for it, we need to, enforce it. And that's what I see this week, and I'm just letting you know. I mean, I wrote numbers and stuff, but I'm just letting you know, especially on that police officer. He was in the car. He goes to park right in the front, pick up his kid, and drive off. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Robles. Anyone else?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Please state your name.
Rob Erickson. At the last council meeting, I explained my conclusion and I felt is inappropriately increasing the power cost recovery factor, but I don't believe I've explained how I came to those conclusions, so I'd like an opportunity to explain. I've spoken with the general manager, Mr. Dwayne Duke, twice telephonically and one time in person. The first conversation was to simply understand the divergence between the lower cost of fossil fuels and the higher cost in the line item accounting for those fossil fuels. His response at the time was that Phelps has no control over the PCRF and that the cost is what CPS charges, which is passed directly to the customer. I explained that the majority of fuels used in the mix are fossil fuels, and therefore cost savings are being realized, yet those cost savings are not passed to the customer. So where are they going? We agreed that he would find out the proportional mix of fuels and get back with me. After 2 weeks, I received my electric bill and discovered that the PCRF rose again by 45 basis points, a factor of 68.57% over 9 months. I spoke with Mr. Duke a week later to try and get an explanation and what I, as a consumer, would expect in the future. After some verbal judo, Mr. Duke confessed that the increase in the PCRF was due to a forecast shortfall last year. It was decided to gradually raise the PCRF so as to assuage Phelps' true intentions to recover the shortfall by lulling the customers into accepting the increase as a norm. He didn't say it that eloquently, but that's what it is. The following meeting that I had in person with Mr. Duke again confirmed both the reason and intention of raising the PCRF. This was witnessed by myself, Councilman Miller, and a concerned citizen who shall remain nameless. So here we are. At first, Phelps said they have no control over the PCRF and the cost is passed from CPS to the customer. This is what was stated on the back of the invoice that you received as well. But the real truth is that Phelps has complete control over the PCRF, and management is not above using deception and misdirection to conceal operational incompetence at the managerial level. So I have to ask, what return on my investment am I receiving when I expect management to act in good faith and exercise due diligence on behalf of the interest of their customers? I want to be clear that I don't blame Mr. Duke. He's new to the job and he appears to be a very capable manager. This has been happening beyond Dwayne's tenure, and therefore such a decision was made at a level above him. Dwayne may lack the moral courage to stand up to the supervisors and point out a wrongdoing, but I'm sure he'll begin to perform once he gets his footing. I owe this council an apology. The last council meeting, I did not respond when asked why I haven't brought this issue to the Phelps board meeting. If I'm to presume that the trustees are acutely aware of their decisions and intentions, then I can also presume that this matter will not be taken seriously by the board and my voice will be marginalized. Now, I know that the city of Floresville owns a majority stake in Phelps. I know that the majority percentage of gross revenues is paid to Floresville and an equal minority to both Stockdale and Pope. I know that technically I am not a resident of Floresville and my vote does not count. Yet I'm more of a Floresville resident due to sheer proximity to the city than I am at any other city within this county. Floresville receives a majority percentage of funds as the majority stakeholder in Phelps, and these funds come from customers such as myself. The situation is tantamount to taxation without representation, and I implore this council to be proactive in this matter and not approach my concerns with a sense of apathy. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for citizen comments?
I do take some time here, Madam Mayor, if there's nobody else. On March 10th, this council voted to direct the law firm of Rolando Rios and Associates to resolve the matter of the cause, and I forget the cause number in front of me. It was related to, quote unquote, my lawsuit against the city in the most expeditious manner possible. On March 18th, March 18th, my attorney received a letter from the law firm of Rolando Rios and Company stating that they would settle this case and forego any legal fees and discovery if I would agree not to refile or relitigate this for 12 months. My attorney and I spoke and returned a counter offer to them saying that on March 12th, the first city council meeting after the special election on May 7th, because a new council member would be named and sworn in, any further action by me would be moot. So we agreed not to refile or relitigate on or before May 12th. Yesterday, my attorney received an email from the law firm of Rolando Rios stating that they would agree if I agreed not to sue until December 1st. In my conversations with my attorney, I said, this makes no sense. After May 12th, any litigation by me would be moot. He says, I'll call them and we'll discuss it. Today I received a phone call from my attorney who, after speaking with Mr. Garza from the law firm of Rolando Rios, said we're at an impasse because Mr. Garza stated to my attorney that his guidance from this council was to not to settle unless there were terms that prevented me from running in the November election, and or to continue seeking legal expense. Now, I don't remember anything on that council action that said settle this matter expeditiously with the caveat that Jim Miller can't run for office in November, or with the caveat that we would seek legal fees. I can assume one of three things. One, the law firm of Rolando Rios is doing this on their own, which is highly unethical. Okay, in which case this council should be very concerned. Or an individual member of this council, or individuals members of this council, gave that guidance contrary to this council's vote to the special counsel, an illegal act. I filed my complaint with the city attorney today because as the city attorney, he is responsible for advising this council on all legal activity. I am told because it is not on the agenda, he cannot speak to it other than what the law says. And I've read his memo to that effect. But I want it on record that this is happening in our city, that we have either a special counsel who feels that they can ignore the wishes of this city council, or members of city council who feel that they don't have to apply by the guidance that they voted for. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizen comments? Thank you. We shall go on to old business. Item A, CNA to approve meeting minutes for the special meeting on January the 11th, 2016. Council, are there any changes to those minutes?
Madam Mayor, the citizens' comments, I think we had talked about before that we should be a little bit more specific of what the comments are said. So I'm going to ask that we table the minutes again.
Mayor, comment?
Yes, please.
At the last discussion of the meeting, what I thought the council had given direction to the city secretary was to have Robert's Rule of Order and to have a template that would actually do so. And so the template that we found, the Robert Rule, they do not indicate anything other than who spoke to the council. There's no detail as to their comments as part of the minutes. According to the research that we did, the things that are key that we need to list are the action items, the motion, any point of orders that are made, any comments from the city attorney that spoke to that. But actually, we didn't want to interpret it according to what the form says, that we're not to detail what, if you're going to go with the Robert's Rule of Order and the template, it doesn't detail what the public comments are.
I feel that it's important to document what the citizens are telling us. But I'm just one council member, so.
Yes, sir, but I'm just saying that the format and the direction that was given to staff, the city
Who gave
secretary.
you that?
The direction at the last, a couple meetings ago, it was a
Council
discussion
procedure.
between, it was a discussion between the council, and I think Councilman Nieto asked about the form, because I think Councilman Miller mentioned about a template and Robert Rules of Order, and so we presented this at the last meeting as a template Following Robert Rules of Order, but I'll let the city attorney speak to that.
In regarding where the Roberts Rules of Order came from, in 2012, the city council adopted Roberts Rules, and they do have a template for how to keep minutes. We haven't adopted by CNA item anything that would overrule that. So when the discussion was had with Monica about what format she should use to present them, Roberts Rules was the one that was used, and so that's here. If the council would like, we could put a CNA item on the next meeting to actually discuss minutia and things that we want to add in specifically, but as of now, the only direction is under Roberts Rules.
Well, I don't think there was ever a vote to go with that format.
It was a vote to adopt Roberts Rules in total for procedural, and the minutes keeping is part of Roberts Rules.
Okay, so we're gonna eliminate citizens' comments as for the record?
It just says in the Roberts Rules to list who speaks at the meetings. We do still have the tapes and recordings of every meeting to speak to what individual citizens say. But like I said, if you would like, we can bring this up to establish a formal template at a future meeting, have it as a CNA for majority vote.
Okay, well, I made a motion that we table until we, I feel that we should include citizens' comments.
Then we're addressing more than one thing here. If the council has adopted Robert's Rules of Order for procedure, Robert's Rules of Order is very specific in what needs to be included in minutes and what does not need to be included in minutes. And as of today, and we've gone back and forth on this, Councilman, I know that, and you challenged me at the last meeting over the length of time. These are for January 11th and January 14th. Is for the accuracy of the minutes. And the minutes become the legal record of council action. And Robert's Rules is very, very specific about that. As far as citizens' comment, one, council cannot take any action on it. If the council directs city staff to take one of those items that are brought up by citizens to put on an agenda for a future meeting, that would go in the minutes as a council direction. Okay, and a legal action. But because of the time involved in trying to either become a translator by tape to put down word for word what every citizen said, or attempting to summarize what every citizen said, creates a lot of challenges and has no impact on the legal record. Correct me if I'm wrong, Council.
I believe that's the intent of Robert's Rules. Whether or not it's a table, I guess that would be by majority vote. If we want to continue using Robert's Rules, we can do that by majority vote at a future meeting. Obviously, it's not on this agenda.
But right now, we have a CNA to table, so can I proceed with that?
There's a motion on the floor to table.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, you can.
There's a motion on the floor to table the minutes for January the 11th, 2016. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion, second. All those in favor? All those opposed? 2-1. Okay, motion carries. The next one is CNA to approve meeting minutes for the regular meeting on January the 14th, 2016.
Same motion, Madam Mayor, I move to table. And again, I'm gonna make the statement that I believe the comments made by the public should be included in the public record.
Okay. Ms. April, would you make a note on that we need to include that in the next agenda item?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We'll need a CNA, is my recommendation, to put on it to establish a format, so that way we have clear direction and clarity of how
Thank you,
long.
Mr. Host. I have a motion to table. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? All opposed?
2-1.
1. Thank you. Motion carries. Presentation and discussion. Next, item A, 3-year annexation plan for 2019. And this is for Chris Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. I have a presentation I want to share with you guys. Just kind of some brief overview of how we got to how we got to the place that we're at.
stabilize or to hit it, so.
All right. What I want to talk about just briefly is why we annex, how we annex, what the legal basis is, where to annex, some of the multiple criteria that we have to consider, and then discussion and questions. And I'll also then present the draft annexation plan as we have today. Why do we annex? Well, there are a number of cases where we're actually providing services directly in places that are outside of our city limits, such as water or sewer, or maybe we're providing street maintenance, maybe we're providing police protection or fire protection. In other cases, we are, other cases we may be providing services indirectly, such as police protection, fire protection, or even land use controls and other regulations that aren't part of what the counties provide. And by indirectly, I mean if you have a piece of property on the very edge of town and you have police and fire protection to your property, then your neighbors who are outside of the city limits are in one sense indirectly benefiting from you having those services. So how do we annex? Well, everything that we can do in terms of annexation is handled under Chapter 43 of the Local Government Code. And there's several basic methods. First is voluntary. Sometimes with the course of development, a property owner may want to be annexed in order to have the services that the city is offering. And so that is done by petition. There is involuntary annexation. It can be done by municipal annexation plan, which is really the subject of what we're talking about tonight. I call it a MAP for short because I wear out real quick if I said municipal annexation plan as many times. And it's handled under subchapter C of Chapter 43. There's also a means by exception which applies to 100 or fewer tracts of land under which there is a residence established and is sparsely populated. There's an exception there under 43052 subparagraph H. And then finally, there is also a requirement that when we're talking about annexation of properties that have an agricultural exemption, that we're required to offer a non-annexation development agreement. That is a requirement for us. All right, so when we're annexing and we're looking at where we want to annex, well, what are we thinking about? Number one, we're trying to be consistent with, and we're using it as a way to implement our comprehensive plan or our set of plans, our future land use plan. So we're targeting areas of strategic importance, that like intersections or gateways to the city, emerging tax base, where we know that the development is happening so we can try to get out ahead of it. We also need to keep an eye on what our neighboring cities are doing with regards to how they're growing their ETJs so that we don't wind up in conflict down the road with a neighboring city. We look at areas that are most likely to be served by areas within our CCN, our Certificate of Convenience and Necessity. That's our license to provide water and sewer service. Another criterion is that it has to be contiguous to the city limits. One way that we can make that happen sometimes is with a non-development agreement, a non-annexation development agreement. But that's a fundamental criterion, is that it has to be contiguous to the current city limits. We look for areas that are best served by our police department, where it makes sense for our PD that's on patrol to be able to respond when called. We look at other areas that we can agree with Wilson County on where we need to incorporate and where things are best served by county services. Another criterion is that we are limited to 10% of our area per year. We can extend that out if we haven't done any annexation in prior years. For the last 2 years, we can get 10% each. So we can go up to 30% of our areas. So essentially, we are limited in the total acreage that we can take in a given year. And we have to annex at least something that's 1,000 foot in width. When we, several years ago, when we developed our future land use plan, we looked at a set of priorities. The number one priority being the 181 corridor north. The number two priority being the 97 corridor to the river. Number three, 181 south. Number four, 97 east. And number five, out towards the industrial park. We also, in many discussions with the county, have talked about areas that are that appear like they would be within our city limits, but actually aren't. And we kind of called those the infill areas and said, all right, well, county, we would like to go ahead and we're going to kind of clean this up, patch this in, these little fragmented areas, we're going to go ahead and cover those and clean them up. In 2011, this is basically what our city limits looked like. The red line being our city limits, the blue line being our 1 mile ETJ, extraterritorial jurisdiction, so an area that outside of our city limits where we have subdivision regulatory authority. In 2015, we did a series of annexations, 2 voluntary annexations, and a number of non-annexation development agreements in order to grow our city out to the Richardson Brothers property, where the new dealership is placed, and then also out to our Civic Center on the south side. If we look at our city limit as it came about in January 1st of 2016, and we compare that to our CCN on record right now, we see that there is some gaps in the area around us where we expect our CCN to grow and fill in, and then also our corporate limits to grow in as well. We look at the limits of our current water system and our current sewer system and where we reasonably believe that we're going to be able to provide service. So our first draft where we should annex under a municipal annexation plan takes us to the dark red areas. And that was the first place that we looked. And subsequently we had conversations with Planning and Zoning Commission and the staff and the city's consulting engineers, and we arrived, we made some revisions to this plan. This was the first pass, if you will. And I'm going to explain the second pass in just a second, but I want to talk just a second just to kind of summarize what's involved in a municipal annexation plan. First thing you have to know is that when you adopt them, they're good. They don't kick in for 3 years. Okay, so you adopt it in 2016, and it doesn't become effective. The annexations don't happen until 2019. Okay? We can phase it from there. We can say we want to take these areas in 2019, these in 2020, etc. These are a list of the steps that we're following right now. So we're actually down to the council and county workshop session where we're discussing these areas that we're proposing to include in our municipal annexation plan. And then we're going to go through a series of steps that are required under the statute that we have to take. So I think that's it for my presentation. I'm glad that worked out without making us blind. I do want to talk about the the draft plan, and I can direct your attention to the map that's at the back of the council chambers. That map is what we're currently proposing. It's broken into a number of different areas. We'll call them, for example, N. The N areas, N1, N2, N3. We call them that because they're on the north side, hence N1, 2, and 3. We're differentiating there because they have different utility service futures with them. Some are part of our CCN, so we're going to be serving them with Floresville water. Some are with Oak Hill Water Supply Corporation. We don't intend to take over any of their service area. That's not what we're doing with the annexation. But we do intend to serve them, those areas, with sewer. The areas to the west basically go to extend the city limits out to the San Antonio River, and that's part of the infill areas, those fragmented areas that we've discussed with the county. The area to the east, out 97 corridor, that's a strategic growth area. We anticipate a lot of important growth in that area. And again, that has, those areas have different future service requirements when it comes to the water system. It's a border and an adjacent water service provider in part of that area. And then finally, a small area on the south side to take us out 181 a little bit to the south. So what we have in the municipal annexation plan in this document is along with the map, is available in the lobby here at City Hall, so anybody can take a look at it. We haven't got it up in a PDF format on the website, then we'll be getting that up real quick. But that should be available for everybody to take a look at. What we tried to do was stay within the maximum amount of area. We kind of tried to undershoot a little bit the maximum area and just try and stay reasonable with what we felt like we could annex and what we felt like we could serve beginning 3 years from now. Each of the parcels that we're proposing for annexation, those are identified in this plan as well by parcel number, not by name, but by tax parcel number. The next steps for us are going to be potentially after council action on a resolution later this evening, is we would go into sending letters of notice to the property owners, but also to the various public entities in the area that are affected. So the school district, the county, obviously, VFDs, emergency service districts, any other kind of special districts, any kind of taxing district will receive a notice, as well as the individual property owners. We are going to be providing draft service plans for each of the areas identified, whether it's in E1 or N3. The service plan will simply depend upon who the current or most logical utility service provider is going to be, and that will outline what services will be available. But that's the process basically going forward. Those notices are going to theoretically go out in June, so a couple months from now. We'll begin putting those together. We're also assembling an inventory from each of the utility providers in our annexation plan of what facilities they do have and what they intend to expand and extend. So that really is in essence the municipal annexation plan. If I forgot something, please help me remember. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try and respond. But that's where we are with municipal annexation.
Thank you, sir.
I
Yes, sir.
have a few questions.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Hugg, you may need to be a part of this. As we were reviewing this map there are some issues over what is the city limits, what is not the city limits. And I would hate to adopt a plan, okay, and as I look at the resolution, it refers to this as the plan that's going to create problems because of the city limits. Or is this annexation plan, independent of the dispute over the city limits, going to solve those issues?
It should solve quite a few of them as we move forward and clarify some of those boundary areas. If there is anything that it looks like is going to be too contested, it can be removed and set for a later date. The city council does reserve the right to amend the plan. So adopting this doesn't finalize and lock it in. It can be moved if necessary for some of those areas we discussed.
But does that amendment to this plan push the clock forward? Again, say if in 6 months we choose to amend this annexation plan, for those areas, does the clock start ticking again for the 3 years?
No, if it's removed, no. If there's area added to the plan, then that will start the clock for new areas that are added. But removing it doesn't affect anything else that's part of the plan already.
Okay. The other piece, and this is probably more technical, is in the plan on page 1, under implementation. The first sentence says, to be annexed, the land must be within the annexing municipality's ETJ and must be contiguous to the city limits unless the land is owned by the city. I think we discussed earlier that that last phrase, unless the land is owned by the city, should be struck.
Correct. Under the local government code, we talked about that. That's just an inclusion that goes with most general law cities. Since we're home rule, that doesn't apply to us. That's why we had to work so hard to get to the Civic Center, even though we owned it. So that line can be struck as an amendment if adopted with that change to it.
And lastly, under implementation, and you talked a little bit about this, Chris, my question is directed towards the city manager, particularly as it relates to these non-annexation development agreements. I know the last time we did this, there was a great deal of uproar in how these citizens were notified about it. And our media is here today. You know, certainly we're talking about a significant higher number of landowners that could potentially be receiving letters from the city attorney or that sort of thing on this. And my question is twofold. One, how do you plan to pre-notify these landowners so we don't have that large uproar again? And two, are we going to be using the same template for an agreement, or are we going to be doing a different type of agreement?
Well, yes, once I hit it, it was really kind of difficult, and we only had 5 landowners to deal with. And I believe, and Chris, you have to help me out, I believe there's somewhere around 44 residents for sure that are part of this plan that will be affected. Chris will be, remember, we're only talking to the landowners, so some of these are not necessarily landowners, but Chris Stewart is charged with getting all of the landowners and contact information, and staff has been directed to, actually, we're going to send the letters certified. We're also going to send the letters regular mail, because some people don't pick up certified return receipt, because sometimes it's from an attorney, they don't need to have it. And then we're going to reach out to them and let them know and have, put this on our website, and also reach out to them and call them personally, just to give them a phone call and say, you know, this is coming, if you have any questions, we're going to put that out there. So we want people to understand. That's why we want to have the map in the lobby so people can see. I like the different color areas, so it really shows what's new and what's added on. And as the mayor mentioned to you earlier tonight, the one in her pack was a little bit too small to read, even with her really good reading glasses on. So we had the bigger one put for the top. So we're going to address that earlier so people can know. Because this is a much larger one than we did the first time. But we cut our teeth on those.
Could I recommend maybe a public information workshop sort of thing prior to these letters going out, letting the public know what's going on and allow for some discourse between the public on what the annexation plan is, so that as these letters go out, okay, we have an informed public?
Yes, we can have a public information meeting. That's a really good suggestion. Chris Stewart will be compiling a list so we can send the same people an invitation to a public meeting. It's more of a public information meeting rather than a public hearing, so to speak. Yes, we can do that and have people come by to come and ask the questions, and we can arrange that based on our consultants' availability.
I was expecting to do that, sir.
And one last question, and this is probably more directed towards Chris. Do we have any idea, post-annexation, what the population of the city of Floresville may be?
I haven't, actually, I haven't taken a garner towards that number. I'd have to bring that with him.
I think as the city goes forward, that's an important number. As we approach 10,000 residents, we have some significant public safety requirements that would have to be addressed. And if those numbers look like a reality in 2019, 2020, or 2021, I think there's going to have to be a lot of planning on the city's part.
As part of this plan, we have to do a service agreement, and so Phelps, we're going to be meeting with Phelps based on, if you will approve this plan, coming and meeting with Phelps, take it to the Phelps themselves, so that they have to provide us a service plan. Our water has to provide a service plan as well as our sewer. So we're hoping that going forward that we can be able to address that and take care of that. But residents, I believe it's less than 50 homes that's going to be affected, but we also have Cobb Finley, that's our third engineer firm. They are actually working with and have done the history, have come here and crawled in our archives, have gone across the street and crawled over there, so that they can come up with a map of our exact meets and bounds, so that we can address this issue. And they've been working with Chris Stewart on that issue. So we have been looking at having an official meets and bounds for the city of Floresville to be part of this project.
When do you think we would have some idea on population projections, or is that included in this?
That's not a difficult exercise. I just need to sit down in front of my calculator.
I'd be interested in those to be included into this kind of plan. My bigger concerns are issues like EMS and dedicated fire service, and when those requirements come to play, and as we approach those numbers, we need to be planning for it.
Correct, and that's part of the reason why the legislature set this up as a 3-year plan. So if it looks like upon this review that we will be reaching those numbers, we have 3 years to start budgeting for in-house fire, things of that nature. So that's why they set it up 3 years on there. But we can work together to get those numbers, and then it might shift if a new development comes in on something that's currently higher. And we'll just keep that updated, rolling update as things come through on there.
Thank you.
Councilman, you have a question?
I have a question. I have a question for Henrietta. Henrietta, can you tell the council how many streets need pavement or need work? Those annexation areas that we're going to be taking in?
I haven't looked at the streets, but M&S, our street, Mr. Hunter is here, he's been working with that, and he's going to do an analysis of that, but I just needed you all to approve the plan so that we can speak to that. I do want to remind you, please forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but the service plan, your street tax plan, when it passes, it's only for existing streets at the time. So any of these streets that are there that may have issues, we want to use our maintenance tax if the public decides to renew that until 2019. But he will be looking at some of those streets, the connectability, once you approve the plan.
So if we approve this annexation, but the street maintenance tax fails,
No, it isn't.
It's time
It's
for
up,
it to
right?
renew. It's up in 2017.
I looked, 2017 it comes up, so these streets wouldn't fall into it until it's up for renewal in 2019 on there. And part of the reason, again, going back to the wisdom of the legislature, it's rare to be able to say that, but on here, the reason why they allow you to take area out without punishment is because we have to adopt a plan, but things like that we don't know until we get a full detailed analysis. So if it turns out that some of these areas, we just won't have the funds to do without the tax or something like that on those areas, they can be removed from the plan until we can figure out a way to annex those with taking care of all those requirements.
if we're staying behind with our streets as we speak, how can we catch up to those if we have been behind so many years on the ones we already have?
And those are good questions. We will get increased tax revenue from these areas that come in, so some of that can be put towards roads and streets. But as far as the nitty-gritty details, I'll have to turn you back over to the city manager.
Yes, well, we anticipate there will be a revenue stream because we will be receiving ad valorem taxes once we annex these properties. So our ad valorem taxes will go up. Tom Turk has done our streets and we're doing our plan for our water, has been meeting with Chris Stewart going forward as we put this plan together. And so once we actually approve the plan, then we can do those kind of numbers for you to say, yes, we can look at that. And even the projections that county can look at for ad valorem taxes, of what the revenue stream will be. And then we can come back, and that's what the nice thing about the 3-year plan is that we can come back and say, yes, that this is what we anticipate and plan doing, and over the 3 years, we can analyze that and do so. But until the plan becomes an official plan, I can't have your consultants do any other detail other than the preliminary plan that we've already presented to you tonight.
So what is the estimated revenue from tax?
We have not done that because you all have not adopted the plan as we presented. We've met with P&Z, I believe, twice on this plan to come back, but we haven't done those numbers because I need to definitely say, this is the plan that you all want to adopt and move forward.
Can I clarify just a little bit, make sure I understand? The plan is essentially the official idea of the city, and staff will be coming back and working with council to say, as we go forward, these are going to be the costs, these are going to be the expected revenue streams, here are the shortfalls or not, and the council at that time can make the decision to change what is going to be annexed in the future, or even at that point in 2019, choose not to annex it. This plan is not a definitive annexation, it just sets the groundwork for potential annexation in the future.
Correct, and in things like tax base, we can get, because we do have the tracks, so we can determine what they're appraised at and things like that. We just need to know what to calculate, and that's why this preliminary plan is here before council. If it's approved with the areas as identified by Mr. Stewart, then we'll know, let's calculate those tax bases. If the council decides to go in a different direction and change it, then we'll focus on those areas. But we need to know the direction on where to focus by the adoption of the plan prior to calculating everything there.
But there's additional revenue beyond the ad valorem tax. There's sales tax that would be collected in these areas. There's permit fees, licensing, and those other revenue sources that would come with that annexation as well.
And there's large sales tax revenue. The McDonald's currently is out of the city limits. It's included in here, so that would be obviously one of the larger sales tax generators in the city.
As well as our franchise fees for gas and telephone and garbage and that sort of things would also be additional revenue that would be coming in.
Correct.
Council?
We've had all these revenues, ad valorem, taxes, everything, and we still could not keep up with our streets. We still could not keep up with our sewers. What makes us think now that we are taking more annexation, more area, we're going to keep up with it when we can't keep it right now as we speak?
I tend to agree with Mr. Ortiz. We've had, the public here telling us that we need to fix our streets, our sewer, our water system. I'm under the impression that we take care of our things first, then we look at annexation.
All right, one of the things that you had directed us to, we adopted a land use plan. And part of your land use plan was this annexation plan. That was part of it, to say to do an annex. When we did phase 1 in October or November of last year, we wanted to do that so that we can take care of